All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad to have you with us on this Tuesday, where we're prepared to bring back this popular session on the path to the next normal. Joining me is Liz Pellett today. And we are delighted to be back with you to talk about this idea of building the next normal. Just a couple of updates here. Again, from our perspective, just want to give you a sense of who we are. The host organization this morning is the Executive Next Practice Institute that's based at the University of California, Irvine, Beal Applied Innovation Center. And we hope to be back in this center soon with both the live and the live stream event. But today, we're delighted to have this live stream event that's broadcasting globally. Glad to have you with us, those from Canada, Mexico, I see a person from Europe, and of course, our Southern California base. Today, here's our agenda. We're going to talk a bit about this path to the next normal and something we call the roadmap to reinvention. During the course of this is a very interactive session. So on your Zoom screen, those of you who have been using this nonstop now, there's a Q&A function on this screen, and also there's a private chat feature. Use the Q&A function or the private chat feature to let us know what your questions are at any point during the course of this presentation. We want to make this extremely interactive. So you've got the Q&A function, and of course you've got the private chat feature as well. A little bit more about the Executive Next Practice Institute. We've been around for 11 years now, over almost 400 sessions, 65,000 attendees, to really look at this type of material, emerging trends, new innovations, new value creation frontiers. This organization is very unique in that you're connecting with top C-suite leaders, director level and above, from multiple industry sectors. And we'll make that clear about why it's so important to have multiple industry sectors represented. We do what's called the formation of next practices. That is, what is going to take you past and beyond the status quo and help you form new deals, strategic alliances, and new strategies. There's our link to all the upcoming events, and there's another one coming up this week. Again, the value proposition for you to get involved with us on a regular basis is this direct connection to a broad basis of C-suite individuals in enterprise-level companies. They're both startups, but mainly they are small, mid-cap, and large-cap enterprises. And also the information is highly timely and relevant to key decision makers. Again, you're interfacing today with a global audience, and again, we welcome you all. Just a quick note, on Thursday morning, we've got Dr. Ken Brosseau and Armand Pujad out of Texas A&M to join us on the Science of Executive Decision Making, same time, the same channel, on Thursday morning, May 21st. We look forward to having you all join us for that exciting session. So for today, we've got a couple of thought leaders to drive this session, and I want to welcome back Liz Pellett, who's a fellow with Johns Hopkins University in change management. She's number 11. I think that's a typo. She's number 1. You should be number 1 on the top 30 global guru list. And good close friends to our mutual friend, Marshall Goldsmith. She's a Marshall Goldsmith Award recipient, and she's a consultant on companies from startups all the way through that mid to large cap Fortune 500 marketplace that I mentioned earlier. So she is the true expert in HR and OD initiatives.
Well, we'll see about that. Let's let the program play out. Scott, as you know, has been doing this for 11 years, and the contribution to not only our local, because you're up in New York and you're in Arizona, and really bringing forward this new information and programs. It's funny you said Zoom nonstop. I think you've been doing Zoom nonstop. With all the programs that EMP is running right now. He held leadership roles at Nestle, DirecTV, Honeywell, and others. But I really think it's this passion and drive that Scott has to bring people together and really look at what's next, right?
That's really what it's all been about, and about giving back to the community as well. So, let's set the stage. Some of you are rejoining us from the first session, so I want to touch on what we talked about last time briefly, but then get into some new material here. So COVID-19 is a train wreck that's brought us all together. We're all connected to it. There's no way of getting around it. and we're feeling the effects of industries that are totally unrelated to us. So with that, we've got to think broader and with a broader peripheral vision. The CEOs Liz and I have been talking to now for 10 weeks have been saying these three things. One, the concern about burn rate. Where are we going to get resources, capital to keep us going? Culture. They're concerned about creating a culture that will allow them to operate virtually and be adaptable. And thirdly, customers are changing their buying patterns, obviously, from airplanes to restaurants to any other vertical you can think of. Value shifts in what the customers want and need. So that creates some opportunities, but challenges. It also drives the need for a broader perspective. That is, when you have this much market uncertainty, whether you're going to look at a V-shaped recovery, unlikely, or a U-shaped recovery, or any other letter that you want to use in the alphabet, it certainly is going to call for a much wider view at what you can do in the marketplace. So Liz and I are keeping that in mind for you as we go through this. Here is what people are saying. Here is where we see the marketplace focusing. First, again, burn rate reduction. How do you eliminate processes, practices, and activities you've been doing that eat up time, resources, money that could be better spent elsewhere? Talent engagement. How can you engage all of your people to support and develop where you're going? In other words, how do you tap the collective IQ? Digital transformation. In the first quarter of this year, companies spent $29 billion on cloud upgrades. Second quarter, we don't have the numbers yet, but it's probably going to be double that. So there's this enormous shift in leveraging digital assets, whether it be teleconferences or other types of tools and platforms. And then the other thing that's been focused on is collaboration, ideation, creativity. That is, how do we create idea formation in this kind of environment? So to take this a little bit further, here were the immediate challenges and opportunities according to CEOs, CHROs, and other top leaders across organization. Number one, they're concerned their culture does not support the kind of agility and adaptability that's necessary in this marketplace. Number two, not enough innovation or new ideas are bubbling up from across the organization. Not enough new ways to go forward and take on these new opportunities that are presenting themselves. In other words, looking for the silver lining. Strategic initiatives and even day-to-day tasks are being executed poorly. Now, I've heard from some companies where productivity has gone up, but in most cases, productivity has gone down. And in fact, things are taking longer to execute than they did before. So how do we resolve that issue? And then finally, you've probably got some others. And this would be a great time on your Q&A function to talk about and just propose to us some of the challenges you have and you're seeing over the past 10 weeks, but even more so going forward. What are your challenges and opportunities? So again, use your Q&A function there, just type it in, and we'll address your challenges as we go through this. Now, two definitions Liz and I want to be sure you're clear about as we go through this. One is, when we talk about innovation, we're not talking about Hyperloop or you're having to go out and create the next self-driving car. We're talking about those small but important incremental innovations that help your customer, that help your markets, that help your teams. So it's more like the roller bag where the Northwest Airlines pilot in 1972 strapped on a handle to his existing baggage and started rolling it around airports. That led to the creation of Travel Pro, which is now a $1.8 billion company. Small incremental step that led to a big breakthrough. So that's one thing we want to keep in mind. Not everybody's going to come up with a 3M sticky. It may be something much smaller, but just as impactful at the end of the day. Second thing that Liz and I really believe in this concept. Innovation and improvement comes from teams, not individuals. Certainly an individual may come up with a great idea, but it takes the team and the collective IQ of that team to really take it forward. Now, Liz, I'm always reminded of the story about the beaver and the rabbit looking at Hoover Dam. And the rabbit says, wow, that's fantastic. And the beaver said, yeah, it started with my idea. So it's this idea. It's not the idea itself. It's how you build, mold, shape, and make things happen. So creation really thrives in an environment of trust, inclusiveness, and freedom to experiment. So keeping that in mind, here are some great opportunities for you. One other definition that Liz and I have for you, we're going to talk about values and value. Values is those standards that relate to your cultural norms. Value, when we talk about that, is the business value creation for your customers, for your markets, for yourself. You know, what value add are you adding to a product or service? So with that, yeah, please.
I think that's a really good frame. And just for everybody, I just want to chime in just a bit. Everyone to keep in mind, the values and the value are kind of different. It's the same railroad track, but a little bit of a different rail. And the other thing that Scott said, we're going to go through our material, each of us, in about 15. And so we're saving time at the end for your questions specifically. We found in the last program that we did that was one of the real advantages to have a couple of experts in our field, sitting around answering any question you have that we can answer.
Absolutely. And so this section is going to be very specific. Last time we talked about some theories, but this one is very much about a path forward for you. So continuing on with that, and one other thing is our driving emphasis today for Liz and I both, and for you, is what's called for now. And we use the example of the Shawshank Redemption, the movie about the Shawshank Redemption, where the prisoner escapes. And the warden's immediate reaction was, I want him found now, not after breakfast, now. And the other part of that metaphor was that the prisoner used a small claw hammer over a period of 20 years to chip away at an opportunity. And that's what we're saying here is you don't necessarily need a sledgehammer right now, but maybe it's a small claw hammer to create those opportunities for yourself. But get started now. Don't wait any longer. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce Liz Pellett again to take us on this journey down the road for cultural transformation to start with. And Liz, I'm going to turn the screen over to you.
Awesome. Thanks very much. All right, let's get this in presentation mode. All right, full screen, am I good?
Good. Okay.
Excellent. I need to make a little disclaimer. I have 2 office cats, so if by any chance you hear scratching or you see a tail behind me or in front of me, it's cool. I'm not in any danger. This is Tony Hsieh is the CEO of Zappos. And this is really interesting to me because he sold the company to Microsoft before he started Zappos for about $112 million. And when asked, why would you sell this company that's making money? He said, well, here's what happened is we built this company without really thinking about the culture. And it's turned into a profitable organization, but the culture sucks. And I just want to build something with that in mind. So this is how Zappos really got built. And I just want to frame, Scott said this is, part 2, but really want to frame how culture is created, because we say culture and sometimes it can be kind of nebulous. But I've been doing this for over 15 years. And what we found is the action and the behaviors of the leaders, what they're paying attention to, what gets rewarded and what gets punished, as well as the allocation of resources. And this 4-box model, we could spend 2 hours on, but it really is how it goes. And on the left-hand side where you see leaders, it doesn't have to be a C-suite, right? It can be all the way down to a supervisory level. It could be a supervisor on 3rd shift in healthcare, and they're running a crew. Well, how they act and how they behave is really a subculture of the organization's overall culture. So let's just keep this one in mind. Because what's happened in organizations is cultures can be created by design or they happen by default, as the Tony Hsieh example is. That culture happened by default, and he found out he wasn't very happy about it. So then he started paying attention to things. Now, a couple things. In the last 8 weeks, March, we had 800 days. We have been running informational webinars on remote, leading remote, being remote, a few times a week. And so this is 3,000 employees that have chimed in. And what they're saying is, how confident are you your organization will maintain its culture? Now, we're going to get to that because maybe you want to maintain it, maybe you don't. And now's the time to really look at that. But you'll see it's about a 50-50 split. And Scott, we had a webinar last week with Brandman University, and we had over 400 people on the webinar, and it played out. We did a poll, and it played out very much like this. So there's a split. Are you confident that it's going to maintain the culture, or is it going to shift? And I can guarantee you, any business, that it's shifting, including my own. Scott and I were talking the other day. I said, this is my third recession. Yes, I've been around a long time. I've owned a business for a long time. And this one's a lot different. But your culture is going to shift in front of you, and virtually you can't see it. And if you're looking at this picture, you might see a cat with a rat in its mouth, and that's true. But the white space, or the space in between the cat and the rat, is a woman's face, where the rat is the eye, and the paw is the nose, and the pepper is the mouth. You see, sometimes we can't see, and everyone has a different frame. And if many of your employees are working virtually, the culture is going to shift. So here's this idea of values, right? How are you going to know if your cultural foundation and your values are even cracked? Well, let's do a little exercise. Scott, everybody, if you would, close your eyes. I can't see you, but just play along. Close your eyes. I want you to think about a pizza, okay? Pizza. Open your eyes. Okay. So if there's 125 people on the call today and we went around and asked, go ahead, chat it in. What's on your pizza? Let's see if we can play along. We would probably have 125 different pizzas. So when you look at your values like trust and responsibility, we would have 125 different definitions of that. So understanding what your values are, your current values versus what your employees do value, there's a gap analysis that's happening there. And now that we've moved to virtual and remote, that gap is becoming wider. So let's talk about it. How do you know if your foundation is cracked? Just take 2 boxes. It's the actions and the behaviors of the leaders in the organization, which many of you may be. And it's the allocation and attention of resources. Scott mentioned burn rate. You know, I do talent development, and I can tell you the first thing that gets cut, no matter what company talks about, people are our most important asset. First thing that gets cut, training. So let's take a look, actions and the behavior, allocation of resources, to a couple of companies, just a couple of examples. Now, these are big companies, I will agree, but even companies 50 people, 25 people, 250 people, it comes down to actions and behavior of the leaders. So I just want to say, working from home, Zappos went right to it, their customer service adapted to it, and now they've got a great YouTube channel where their employees are sharing their own story. If you've ever flown and are a frequent flyer of Southwest Airlines, great email direct to my email box about the safety and security. And if you know things about Southwest, you know, it's about that, their customers, their employees. We know that industry is going through an evolution. And in the last recession, Southwest was one of the few airlines that did not furlough, and a bunch of senior executives took the cut. But we're seeing something now that I don't know if any airline is going to be able to try and keep that. IKEA did a great thing. They closed their doors in March when they were supposed to, but they continued to pay their employees through April. And then when it became apparent that they couldn't reopen, they're carrying on the tradition of still paying for their benefits and their family benefits. So while they can't pay them their hourly wage, they're still supporting them. And that's a real foundation for IKEA. And the other example is Netflix. Netflix foundation and value is they believe they wouldn't be around without the creative industry, right? If the creative industry isn't doing these great shows that we've been binge watching, then how can they survive? So what they did was they gave $100,000 to the creative industry. Sorry, $100,000 to the creative industry to try and help some of the salary, augment the salary. All right, so what if? Right now, we're in an interesting time, but if you reflect and are living your values and have a handle on your culture and understand where it's going and where it's been, the numerous studies show us that there's deeper revenue growth, employment growth, stock price, and net income. The bottom line is companies that live their values are better performing and better places to work and more profitable. What's going to happen if you're not living your values? There's so many examples, right? Let me give you a couple. Chipotle, Ebola, didn't move, didn't close stores, waited, and it was until 12 stores reported Ebola that they closed and they started new procedures. Unlike, take Starbucks. Starbucks had an incident of diversity. And what did they do? Starbucks, within a week, closed every Starbucks at 2:00 and had diversity sensitivity training for every employee. What's going on today? Well, we could talk about Enron a long time ago. Houston headquarters, outside of the headquarters, this beautiful stone etched of their values. And the number one value for Enron was ethics. And that's what shut them down. Amazon is in the spotlight today. You know, Amazon talks a lot about its customers, but caring about its employees, right? And now we've seen employees that are, wanting to walk off and unionize. And these are things that actions and behaviors are really important when it comes down to this, because if you are not living your values, someone's going to call you out. And I can tell you that historically, that will live in your cultural DNA forever. It doesn't go away. How your organization is handling this. In the past, I always said, changing your culture, evolution, not a revolution. I stand corrected, okay? I never thought I would see this. But cultures need to potentially evolve right now. So when Scott talks about ideation and understanding, one of the things that we're asking when we're looking at cultural assessments is, are you doing ideation? Are you doing collaboration? Are you open? Has managing this new way opened you for new ideas? And many of over 3,000 are telling us, or 66% of 3,000 are telling us that, yes, this is demanding us to change the way we do work. And we're going to continue to see it. How many conferences do you know of that have been canceled completely into 2021? Live training. It's going in a very, very different direction. So if we're going to grow and we're going to develop our people, we have to start coming up with new ways to do it. And quite frankly, are your leaders ready to do things this radically different the way we're going to have to do it? I know an awful lot of organizations that went to open workspace. Yeah, maybe it was to save money, sure. But it was sold as collaboration, right? This is the new way to get work done. With distancing, that whole idea may have to be changed and reshaped. Brick and mortar. Many places, if you're going to stay and go remote, which a lot of employees are going to want to because they've created this schedule. Scott said it earlier, some organizations are finding their productivity is up. And a lot of that has to do with remote work. So what are we going to do when we do get all clear? How has your culture shifted? How will you need to shift it? Because we don't know how long this is going to go on, right? It keeps changing. It's fluid. And what we see about this remote arrangement from a cultural perspective, people are feeling like they could do it indefinitely. I can tell you there are some parents who are like, get me out of here now. But But what's going to happen in the school year? I've got an 18-year-old daughter supposed to go away to college, the college experience.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah, Liz, I mean, Liz, when we talk, Liz and I talked about this this whole session, and the word normal has been bounced around. There's got to be another word, because there won't be a normal that we get back to. That's the point. There won't be this stable place that we all won't go to. And we're not, my favorite saying is Jerry Seinfeld. He's got that whole riff. Jerry Seinfeld talks about humans. We always want to be comfortable. So we're about to go on a trip we get excited. We go on the trip. We're on the trip. We can't wait to get home. We stand up. We can't wait to sit back down. And we're a creature of habit trying to get to a level of comfortable, and we're not going to get there. So how do you operate in that kind of environment where things are adapting and changing constantly?
No, I completely agree with you. I say the new normal is there is no new normal. And it's funny, you've been doing so many webinars, and we have our little happy hour on Fridays, and it's cleared out behind you. I don't know if people notice that, but that is an open work environment that we were just talking about that is empty. So how's it going to get full? And will there, be no partitions? This is really interesting to me because I've done so many strategy sessions in the last 3 to 5 years with executive teams, and everybody wanted to look at 2020, right? 2020, it's catchy. Vision 2020, it's good. When we get to Vision 2020, where we are today, 10 weeks ago, you can just hit Control-Alt-Delete because it's gone. We cannot operate the way that we've operated before. And all those words around 2020 vision, they've probably changed, or they need to change. And my question to the top leadership teams are, do you have the bench strength to make those changes and those shifts as quickly as they need to be done? Many times in times of crisis that I've noticed is that we want to hunker down. We just want to hunker down with the folks around us. One of the last remote webinars I did, this was perfect. Someone asked the question, how do I deal with someone on a performance improvement plan while they're remote? And I was like, the same way you would do it if they were in your purview, in your building. Things like that don't change, but we have to really realize, are we ready for them? I had a couple more slides, but I want you folks to think about breaking. I often talk sometimes about cultural shift where we need to break it. Even though it's not broken, we might want to. And anyone who's ever dropped a plastic glass in the kitchen floor was thankful it was plastic. And if you've ever dropped a glass on your kitchen floor, it may have shattered. But now is the time to really look at that, because if we don't learn anything from this opportunity, it's sad, but we've missed something then. Again, revolution, not an evolution. What are we doing to monitor and track productivity? And the longer people stay out and create a new normal for themselves, a new schedule, there will be a need for measurement of productivity, because productivity and engagement equals profitability. Have we done a needs analysis on what we have? We furloughed. Many companies have furloughed employees. And did we furlough the right employees? We need to understand where our knowledge, skill, and ability lie in order to make those tough decisions. Retention of the A players. I mentioned technology is going to shift, but you've got some people who still are going to want to be grown and developed. Your succession planning might need to be revisited. Your whole workforce planning might need to be revisited. But these A players, the ones we want them to stick around. And so what are we doing to do that? I know some leaders that are very uncomfortable right now because they were the leaders that believed in time in versus results. So now that we're measuring and looking at things differently, you can't walk around the office at 5:30, 6 o'clock and make a determination on who's really kicking butt. It's not there anymore. So are your leaders comfortable with understanding that we're going to make a shift that goes from monitoring people from results, not just time in? And believe me, when this year's performance evaluations roll around, not only the legality of it, the HR perspective, that might be a whole way you have to do things differently. And we need to start thinking about that now, though, not when, it's performance time. And the other thing about these workspaces that are contracting, there may not need to be a big shift, or you may not need as much brick and mortar as you have now. And that's another thing. That's why Scott and I are both like, now's the time. You got to look at your lease. When is your lease up? Do you need that much space? Are you going to shift? If you're going to shift, where are you going to shift? So just some closing thoughts from a cultural perspective. Make sure that you have clear expectations of your leaders, and you're aligned to your values, and that we are measuring individual output, team output for ideation and growth, giving and ensuring that we have some kind of feedback mechanism within the organization, and that we're holding people accountable, whether it's living your values or supporting the culture or being productive. And there's got to be consequences if they're not. And again, you can remember that 4-box model, what gets rewarded and what gets punished. And that's super important when you're talking about organizational culture is, how do people get measured, and are they being treated equally? I guess I would say.
Yeah. So let's pick up on that. So now let's talk about a path forward. So we've set the stage here from the reason we want to go culturally, and I'm
going to stop sharing, Scott.
Yeah. Let's pick it up from here.
Great.
And just quickly, I want to get into, give me just a moment, and we'll talk about an actual case study. So what is the path forward? We've set the stage culturally, the need for cultural transformation. We've got all these things to consider that Liz was talking about. So let's talk about the path forward. Here's an actual case example. So we're going to use a live example to talk about the virtual path forward. And this is an actual case study of the city of Irvine, California, 1,900 employees, one of the most innovative cities in the country. But even so, they knew they had a gap. So this is in the old days, 90 days ago, where we could get people in a room and start strategizing. But the process that we're going to describe to you is the same, whether it's in person or virtual. So let's walk through this. First of all, the first thing these companies do is look at the path forward from a next practices standpoint. So you're asking them 4 questions of your team. All right, follow along with me on this. Mm-hmm. We want to stop doing things so we can free up time. Now, that's the first question you ask, and people are happiest that you ask that question first, because then we're getting into what they can stop doing to free up resources, time, and energy. Secondly, what can we create? What can we start doing for improved value, employee satisfaction, and overall effectiveness? So we're freeing up their minds and then asking them to create. We're also looking at strategy. Do we have the right strategic business initiatives in place? Again, this is your whole executive team that's part of this conversation. And then finally, as Liz was talking about, how do we build and shift and leverage our culture into a positive transformation for our stakeholders? That is customers, markets, employees, community. That is build a culture of agility and adaptability. Those are 4 elements we're taking our teams through. So take a look at this. This is what the city of Irvine again did. They took it, and this were
okay, stop. Scott, this is my favorite slide.
I know, great. It's detailed.
I know. If you ever remember that commercial, right? It was like this guy's up in front of the room with a pointer, and it's like, I know you can't see this because it's 4-point font, but if this is a really good spreadsheet, it's just small.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. But I want to show this detail to you because this is actual output from a client. And what they did was, this is some 280 ideas they came up with in one session of ideas they could either stop doing or improve or create. And then they took that and the 3 columns to the right, they started scoring what they could do. And it was a very interactive exercise. So out of all those ideas, 280 ideas, narrowed it down to 5 or 6 that were key initiatives they could start on. Very powerful. Again, this is a process we can take you through either in a virtual setting. It's the same type of process, but it's very powerful in terms of getting to the new ways forward. So let's take this further. Say that you create a customer next practices team and you look at the day in the life of a customer. What's the first thing you do? With your team, virtually, you storyboard the customer experience, all the various touch points that a customer has with you during the course of their day. Secondly, examine the data. What are customers saying on the web, social media? What are they saying in support calls, discussion forums, search trend, social media, as I mentioned? What's the data telling you about what your customers are saying now? Not in March. What are they saying now in May? Where can each touch point be improved? Now, here's the amazing thing, and Liz and I've been talking about this with you and others, and that is your employees now are, in many cases, even closer to your customer than they ever were. They've had time to reflect. They've had time to digest what customers are saying. This is a great time to ask them what's not working or what is working. Or what's a practice we've been doing for years that no longer makes any sense.
Right.
It's amazing. And then finally, start testing. Use that small claw hammer against the wall and test it. And maybe that test is a week long, maybe that test is a month long, but you determine what's working and what's not. And you make it a safe environment, going back to what Liz talked about culture, making it a safe environment so people can experiment and not get their hand wrapped if they make a wrong decision. So again, it's about those small wins. So here's the prescription that Liz and I have for cutting through virtual fog. And this is what we're operating in right now. We're in this foggy environment where the market is ambiguous. If you even look at how states are opening up after COVID-19, everybody's on a different playing field. Everybody, right down to every single city in the country has a different opening plan.
Yeah, you know what? Let me jump on that just because I have a client in Alabama. It's the Alabama Co-op. So they run the electricity for the state of Alabama. There's only like 250 employees, believe it or not. And we were talking about this almost 2 weeks ago, and they said, we have to reopen the state. And I was like, what do you mean? You have to reopen the state. Every state around them was reopening. So Alabama had to actually reopen their state just from that kind of pressure. We're in Southern California, and I just checked the weather this morning. Memorial Day is supposed to be 87 degrees. Our beaches are only open to activity, meaning you can't go to the beach and sit there with a cooler. You can only walk and move, and that's going to be real interesting. But just wanted to give a couple examples, Scott.
Oh, I know it's a completely different. So when you're in a situation like this, and also virtual fog manifests itself this way. When you're on Zoom calls or these other conferences calls we have, you obviously don't have the benefit of seeing people's body language necessarily and some other elements. I want to get to that too. So it's how do you cut through that so you have clarity of communication and engagement with people. So the cultural assessment is one way you can do that. Assess how your culture is shifting or not to be agile and adaptive. Secondly, how can you improve that connection with customers and the market in general to improve service? How can you identify new ways that your team can come up with new ideas? How can you streamline your current practices so you are improving every single day? So what we prescribe is this whole idea of a roadmap to reinvention. Part of this is we are prescribing to help you cut through that virtual fog to access your collective IQ in this virtual environment. So that means cutting through fog means since we no longer meet face-to-face, how do you create spontaneous collaboration among teams? How do you create that serendipitous interaction? Like you're running or walking down the hall, you bump into somebody, you both come up with this idea together. How do you create that in a virtual environment? how do you make sure everybody's included on your idea exchange?
Mm-hmm.
And then last, and you touched on this too, Liz, is the emotional reward of having your idea listened to, recognized, and rewarded.
Okay.
So this is what we're working with as you go to a virtual environment or a hybrid environment where you've got some people virtual and some people in the office with you. So let's walk through this. Where do you actually start? So we're prescribing this. The roadmap to reinvention looks like this. And we can't be it's as simple and as complex as this, and that is the virtual offsite. You've got to have some way where you can raise the flag of your organization, have people rally around it, and move forward. And so what we prescribe here is doing the pre-interviews with your key leaders, maybe the executive team or others on your team, and other contributors to your organization.
Right, could be skip level.
Exactly.
All depends on what the impetus for change is will help with the prescription of making it happen, right?
Yeah, and you definitely want to do this skip level, as you pointed out, Liz, is because you want the inputs of everyone, going back to that emotional rewards. And plus, frankly, the people are closer to what's happening than many executives are right now. So,
well, I think, and that's why these virtual webinars have been so successful, because they can be customized to an organization. We're asking them in the invite to the webinar to take this link to a SurveyMonkey survey. I get the results of the SurveyMonkey survey before I do the webinar, and then just customize it because the information is coming from their people.
Yeah.
But we got to ask people, if we're going to, otherwise it's just an assumption, and we all know what that one plays out.
Exactly. So you've got two types of data. Then you've got the online type survey data we're doing, and then the interviews that we're doing with the key leaders. So after that's accumulated, then there's a meeting with your principals to plan out the virtual offsite. Now, we've taken a menu-based approach to this. You may do all of these, you may do one or two of these, depending on your organizational situation. So we've laid it out as a couple of days, so let's just kind of walk this through. Imagine you're taking a team off on this virtual offsite. So you're starting off with your core purpose as an organization. It may have changed. It may have slightly modified. The vision may have slightly changed. I mean, can you imagine if you're with Delta right now or Southwest Airlines, and you're hearing from the CEO, their vision has definitely changed for the next 4 years. Different direction. Your organization may not be that large, but also may have the same types of changes. So starting off with purpose.
Any organization has been impacted. Doesn't matter.
Everybody.
And everything from higher education to fast food. I mean, everybody has been affected. And I wanted to, I know we only have a couple more minutes before we start taking questions, but Scott, you and I were talking the other day about reinvention, right? And how to get the collective group together to, if you can't do things the way you were doing them, how can you do them differently? And I love your example of that Chicago. Tell the example, because that was cool.
Well, again, what we're looking for are nuggets of where we can change. So people have to get creative. There's a pizzeria in Chicago that sells pizza by the slice. And the city of Chicago has told them you can't do that anymore because of the current environment. So what do? They repurposed their pizza oven. They found out the pizza oven could melt plastic. And so they started making face masks in their pizza ovens and they're very successful at it. So that's an extreme example. But again, it's those kind of nuggets we're looking for, small to large things that often come from your entire workforce, not just your executive team, that can help us shift and be more successful in the current environment.
Yeah, so but it's a great example, right? It's a pizzeria. We're talking about a small pizzeria that kind of came up with this, and now we see other pizza folks doing it. But you want a big example, you go to Bacardi, right? Bacardi rum, right. If you're familiar with it. And by the way, alcohol sales are up by 55% last month. No surprise there. But what Bacardi did is they've shifted their production line and are taking the alcohol and making hand sanitizer, and specifically basically funneling it to healthcare. So that again, this whole thing has caused most of us to shift in one way or another. So
that really has. So again, going in the purpose of this virtual offsite is to do a measured, guided approach, not random, not scattershot, but take people through a way that they can contribute, but they're contributing in line with your overall purpose. So again, we also do the cultural assessment results right up front on the first day so that people can identify where their culture's at and what they need to do potentially to be more agile and adaptable and to build their capabilities. We talk about the voice of the culture, for the voice of the customer. What is your customer saying? What are we seeing? What are we sensing that is changing in the marketplace? So all of these are elements of that first day. And of course, within all of this, we're screening it against what we can do. What kind of budget do we have? What are the resources we have? But remember, part of that exercise we talked about earlier, the next practices exercise you're going to use in this session was to eliminate things. So you free up resources and time. So again, that's part of the first day. And then you get into the potential of the second day and you're starting to form teams around what you can tackle.
Well, and Scott, let me just jump in on that one because, it's a lot easier when we do these workshops that we've done, when people are in the room. You can get up, you can go to the restroom, you can get a coffee, it's in the back of the room. And so when we're talking about day one and day two, you don't have to think about that this is like you're sitting in your chair on a Zoom meeting, for 8 hours. It doesn't go like that. These are deliverables. They could be done over, weeks. Just to make sure that you're heading in the right direction, or depending on your need of the organization, maybe you do need to do them in a very short time frame. But I just wanted to say, we refer to day one and day two, but it can be very different.
Yeah, and even in the old days of the live sessions, these sometimes were spread out over a period of weeks. There are certain elements, however, in these where we prescribe you have everybody on the call or in the room at the same time, so to speak, on the virtual call. And that would be when you talk about vision and purpose, when you talk about the key strategic initiatives, there are key touch points where you'd want to have everybody together so they're experiencing it at the same time. But most of these are ongoing and they're running in parallel. Exactly right. So again, here's a few other ones we're talking about. Once you identify your strategic initiatives, the way you want to go forward, you form these functional and cross-functional teams that meet on their own schedules. You may have a need for tactical training, perhaps virtual team effectiveness. How do you take an innovative idea from concept to proof and test it?
And it can be, it could be group dynamics. Right now, we've got requests in for conflict resolution because, as you pointed out, body language and people, right now are trying to work through, okay, if there's a conflict, what are we going to do? How are we going to work it out? What's my conflict style? So we are being asked to still do some of the soft skill that we've been providing for years, whether it's conflict resolution or communication or even strategy, right? Developing a new strategy. And one of the things that is very new to me, because I'd not seen it before, and I think goes along with having to adapt, right? So I'm aligned with a company that has a cultural assessment, different than mine, but they have one. And they actually just were able to change it up a bit. And now it's actually a measurement of, can your employees work remote or not? And it just runs through values and some other dimensions, if you will. And I took it. It was very, very interesting. So there's another piece of assessment now that we're seeing it come into play is, can you be a virtual employee?
Yeah, that's all part of it. And again, I want to emphasize in terms of a way going forward, this is a team effort. If we want to take a step back, this is a great time and great opportunity to measure where your company can go, your entire team. So whether you are an HR person or a financial person,
sure,
or a consultant, this is a holistic way to approach it rather than piecemeal. One of the things we're seeing in this virtual fog is that people are just trying all these random prescriptions, and that does not work. In terms of following this process, where you're starting at the highest point, dealing with your purpose vision, and then taking people through a way of engaging them to relook at the business differently, it's extremely powerful. And it all fits together. That's the main point we want to emphasize today, is take a holistic approach. So again, we went through, again, your vision, purpose, strategic initiatives, and then assembling the teams to get through it. It's extremely powerful. And the other thing, it engages people in a connected way.
Very much so.
Way.
That's great. Really good overview, Scott. Do we have any questions that have come in? Are we ready?
Just a couple of things. I'll put this up. Couple of people asked earlier if there was it's the same thing, same question around normal, next normal. And again, this process is designed to be fluid so that we are identifying whatever it is you will look like in the future. But it also allows you enough time, enough elements to shift as you need to. That's the other key part of this. The strategy we come up with this year obviously is going to look much different than next year. Other questions, please use your Q&A function and we'll delve into this. Okay, question about value and values. Great question. So let me talk about the business value, and then Liz will talk about core values. Business value is the essence of it. And by the way, this is the language of CEOs, right? They want to hear about value creation or value frontiers. Value frontiers. That means right now, it's the pizza example all over again. What is our next value proposition look like? What is the customer going to buy? What's going to create revenue, and drive growth and success? It's that simple. What are we creating with our product service that is creating value? So that's the business side of this equation, and that's where we start with it. Now, to support that is our core values. So Liz, you talked about that as such a powerful element of making things run or not run.
Yeah, it was funny. I was just jumped into a different presentation because I wanted to show a slide. But when you have core values, sometimes they're hard to remember. Sometimes they're an acronym, which is easy. We just did Pasadena Humane Society, right? And it's a HR nightmare, but I love the acronym they came up with, which is LIC: learning, integrity, collaboration, and kindness. And they can remember that, and it's LIC for a reason. So anyways, your values need to be defined in behavioral terms. That's the most important thing. Value creation, define them in behavioral terms. And then once they're defined in behavioral terms, you need to roll them into some kind of performance. That's the only way that people are going to be held accountable. It goes back to close your eyes and a pizza, right? If we say we value trust, people are going to have a different frame of what trust is to them. So from values, it's more of a we attach it to a behavioral that can be measured, a behavior that can be measured.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. And I want to go ahead and put up, a couple of people are asking about where do we go from here? So let me get into this first. First of all, again, to make this clear, the simple step is, if you want to do something like this for your own team, Liz and I offer this kind of webinar that's customized for your own team. That's one thing you can do just to get started. And that's another way of aligning your entire team to potentially what next steps you can take in this environment. So that's one of the options you could have. Second would be, obviously, we do this cultural capability assessment. Doing that, and coupled with, in many cases, an interview with your executive team about where the needs are. So right. The assessment is online and done. The third step is what we just prescribed, and that is plan a virtual offsite. This summer, by the way, we've had a lot of clients requesting offsites. Here's why. The traditional season of vacations is not happening. People are either doing staycations or they're delaying their vacations till later on in the year when they can travel. So that means many people are in-house, so to speak, available to participate in these kind of offsites. So Usually August would have been a dead month. We're seeing a lot of activity in terms of people getting ahead of the curve and planning these offsites. So
I can tell you that, schedule and things just are absolutely not normal. And this is very sad, but I asked my daughter yesterday how her classes were going, and she said they stopped last week. I'm like, right, we didn't have any kind of graduation. There's not been a pomp and circumstance, So things are thrown so far off in many of our lives.
Yeah, it's really amazing, isn't it? This is, like I said, I think the road back, the path to this next normal, as we talked about, is going to be in flux for a while. We were hopeful it would be a V shape where we rapidly come back and it's just all good again. It's not going to happen. This is going to be over a period of the next 12 months, 24 months. So these steps that we're prescribing for you, it may be a case where you want to do something this summer and come back to it again at the end of the year and then do it again in spring or summer of next year. So we invite you to take a look at that. A couple of things as we close off here. This session is recorded. It'll be available to view by next Thursday, this coming Thursday. And we'll be sending you the link so you can take a look at it.
Yep.
We'll also be glad to send you some of these materials, a sample of the assessment, a sample of the roadmap to Reinvention upon request. So you've got our contact information there. And again, we look forward to seeing you all on Thursday as well for our session on Thursday. Liz, thank you so much again. Fantastic job. Great information, Scott, as always.
Always a good time. And thank you all for joining us. I know that sometimes we're on information overload from these Zoom calls, but hopefully we got a lot of value out of this one, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again, Liz. Talk soon. I'll leave our contact stuff up here. Thanks again.